6 spine-chilling true stories of haunted home invasions exposed, sinister secrets revealed. The night air was thick with an unsettling stillness as Sarah pulled into her driveway. After a grueling shift as a waitress, her body screamed for rest. But dread coiled tightly in her stomach when she noticed their front door slightly ajar. "Did I leave it open?" she muttered to herself, brushing off the prickling chill that washed over her, as if an unseen force whispered warnings from the shadows. Inside, the familiar warmth of home felt wrong. A family photo hung askew, its crooked angle striking her as particularly menacing. Goosebumps erupted on her skin as she padded toward Jake's room. The rhythmic thud of bass from his headphones drowned out her approach, but something felt out of sync. She shook off the unease, focusing instead on the subtle changes around her. The strange symbols scratched on the walls, their meanings forever lost, felt like a sinister invitation that sent icy fingers crawling up her spine. As days stretched on, the shadows outside her windows danced mockingly. A debilitating paranoia crept in, turning their modest home into a prison. The whispers from neighbors twisted into dark rumors. Home invasions tainted the quiet suburb, leaving families shattered and Sarah on edge. She approached the police for support, but her pleas were met with dismissive shrugs and eyes cast down to paperwork. They didn't care about the struggles of someone like her. Her heart raced in frustration. Desperate for answers, she knocked on doors, but trust had become a precious commodity in their neighborhood. Mr. Thompson, a seemingly benign elderly man, gave her chills every time they crossed paths. His lawn was pristine, but his gaze was anything but welcoming. Each time he looked at her, it felt like he was peeling back the layers of her very being. What secrets did he hide behind those homey curtains? The fear tightened like a noose. Every creak of the floorboards felt like a threat, each knock on the walls echoing a malevolent heartbeat. Was someone really watching them? She couldn't shake the feeling. On a particularly tense evening, she thought she saw movement outside her window, just a flicker, a flash of darkness disappearing into the night. Could it all be in her head? Or were they in real danger? She didn't have time to grab her phone before an anonymous note slipped under the door, chilling her to the bone. "We are always watching. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Heart pounding, Sarah peered out the peephole, straining to catch a glimpse of the intruder. The quiet amplified her fears, each tick of the clock echoing like a warning bell. Her breath hitched in a sudden panic as she heard a firm knock at the door, a sound so innocuous yet cloaked in dread. Would she find help or horror waiting just beyond that thin barrier? She had to know. She had to confront whatever lurked in the shadows, but her body felt frozen, rooted to the spot. What awaited her beyond the door? The knock came again, more urgent this time. Sarah's heart hammered in her chest like a wild animal trying to escape. She pressed her back against the wall, fighting the instinct to flee. The cold air wrapped around her, tightening like a vice. "Who's there?" Her voice betrayed her, trembling and barely above a whisper. Silence swallowed her words. A rush of fear coursed through her veins, electrifying her senses. The second knock echoed ominously, sharper, followed by a faint sound, the scraping of something against wood. She could bolt, run up the stairs, lock every door behind her. But staying felt like the darker choice, like she'd be letting whatever laid beyond the door claim dominion over her life. She took a shaky breath and slowly turned the doorknob, each click of the mechanism resembling the ticking of a countdown. Swinging the door open, she peered into the inky darkness of the porch. The air felt heavy, almost suffocating. No one stood there. Just the silhouettes of trees swaying, their branches clawing at the night sky. An uneasy relief washed over her, but it was short-lived. Something glinted on the welcome mat, a shard of glass or metal. As she bent down to inspect it, dread sent chills racing down her spine. It was a silver key. A key. Panic spiraled through her, it was a clear signal, a sinister invitation. Who had this key? What did it unlock? The violence of her curiosity clashed with the instinct to retreat. She snatched the key and darted back inside, slamming the door shut behind her, heart racing, breath shallow. Every corner of her home felt different now, alive with shadows that danced just out of view. She stumbled backward into the living room, listening for any murmur of sound. Was someone breaking in right now? Or was she already inside a trap? The key weighed heavy in her palm, its edge biting against her skin. Suddenly, an idea struck her through the fog of fear. The basement. The previous owners had left it untouched, a sealed-off relic of the home. Maybe it was their last destination, the key to uncovering the truth lurking in the darkness below. Gathering her courage, Sarah glanced at Jake's closed door, the faint sound of his music rising from within. She was determined to protect her son, to shield him from whatever hell manifested outside their walls. But in her gut, an ominous voice screamed that this could very well lead to their doom. Tiptoeing to the basement door, she hesitated. The cold metal of the doorknob sent shocks of trepidation zigzagging up her arm. With a weak motion, she placed the key in the lock. It turned with a satisfying click that felt like a death knell. As she pulled the door open, a rush of stale air gushed out, thick and pungent. The darkness beckoned her in. She grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer and stepped down the creaking wooden stairs, each step like a countdown to horror. Shadows writhed against her beam of light, twisting into grotesque shapes along the walls. What if it's all in my head? She murmured to herself, but deep down she felt something cold and clammy wrapping around her heart. This was real, and the suffocating dread begged her to turn back, but some invisible force propelled her forward. The air thickened with the scent of mildew and something else, something iron-like. A muffled sound emerged from the darkness below, low and sinister, echoing like a warning. She barely breathed as she scanned the small room at the bottom. There, tucked in the corner, a form shifted, its outline barely distinguishable against the black backdrop of the basement. "Jake?" she called, her voice splintered with fear. What awaited her in that Stygian gloom? And just as a flicker of movement came into view, a voice rasped from the shadows, chilling her to her core. "You shouldn't have come here, Sarah." It's too late. What had she stumbled into? The shape in the corner shifted again, and a faint glimmer caught Sarah's eye, something wet, glistening under her struggling flashlight. Terror gripped her throat like a vice. Who are you?" she stammered, her voice cracking. The outline morphed, twisting as if it were trying to pull itself into existence. The air felt even heavier now, charged with an unspoken threat. "Please, step back," the voice echoed hollowly, a raspy whisper entangled with silence. It didn't sound like Jake, and panic surged inside her, threatening to engulf her whole. Was that her son hiding behind whatever horror was unfolding here? Maintaining her grip on the flashlight, she aimed the beam directly at the shadow. As the light flickered upon it, every ounce of her resolve broke. A figure hunched over, face hidden under a tangled mane of dark hair, matted and stained. She took a shaky step back, the cold concrete tightening around her. "Get away!" she yelled, fighting through the wave of dread. She wanted to run, but instinct held her rooted. That voice so familiar. "Jake?" she called again, desperation lacing each syllable. "Not him," the figure rasped, inching closer. The smell of decay was unmistakable, a nauseating mixture of dirt and copper. What was happening? Her heartbeat drummed painfully in her ears as she struggled to breathe, every corner of the room closing in. The entity paused, almost as if it sensed her fear, and then a guttural laugh resonated from its throat. "He cannot help you now. They can't help you." She felt the walls of the basement suffocating her with memories of all the strange happenings that had plagued their home since they moved in. The shadows, the knocks at odd hours, the whispers that drifted through the halls at night when she lay awake waiting for sleep. All signs seemed to spiral into one horrifying conclusion. "No," she whimpered, shaking her head frantically. "You're lying. You're not real." The figure straightened, limbs stretching into grotesque angles, revealing a face. The shadows formed it slowly as if reluctant to show the truth. It was a twisted mask of pain, eyes hollow and sunken. In those eyes, she saw her son and the terror of something worse. Mommy! Echoed a distant, frightened call. Not from the figure but from behind her, soft and muffled. Help me! A sob broke from Sarah's throat as she turned instinctively, racing back up the stairs, heart pounding against her ribs. But something icy gripped her ankles, a dark tendril from the dark figure, dragging her back down. Stay! It hissed, a cacophony of voices mixing with Jake's terrified scream. You cannot leave. With a sudden burst of strength, she yanked herself free, the flash of the key glimmering in her mind as she took the stairs two at a time. The basement door loomed above her, beckoning with the promise of safety. She had to get to Jake, to save him before despair enveloped her whole. Just as she reached for the doorknob, a whisper curled around her, a cold breath brushing against her ear. You can't run from the truth. The door flung open, light pouring in, and she stumbled into the hallway, gasping for breath. She turned to see the twisted figure summoning shadows, strands of darkness shot through with despair. Jake! She screamed, searching frantically, but silence filled the air, heavy and oppressive. What awaited her upstairs? Any semblance of safety vanished. Ahead, something moved, a silhouette wavering just outside the light's reach. A chill slipped down her spine. Had her son descended into the darkness? Or was it too late for both of them? In that moment of terrifying uncertainty, Sarah felt as if she stood at the edge of a chasm, a decision looming. Would she face the nightmare that awaited in the shadows, or would she remain a part of its terrible lure? And as the darkness pulsed quietly around her, she whispered fiercely, I will find you, Jake. I will not leave you. What awaited her in the suffocating dark? The hallway was a tunnel of shadows, swallowing any trace of light behind her. Sarah's heart thundered in her chest as she squinted, straining to catch a glimpse of Jake. The air felt thicker, more oppressive, as if the darkness itself were alive, coiling around her like a serpent ready to strike. Jake! She called again, her voice a mere whimper now. Every corner turned stung with the icy grip of dread, as if unseen hands were pushing against her, urging her to retreat. But she couldn't back down. She wouldn't. Footsteps echoed softly, a shuffling sound drawing nearer. Her pulse quickened. Was it Jake? Or something worse? She gripped the flashlight tighter, its beam flickering as though sensing her rising panic. Every flicker cast monstrous shadows that danced along the walls, twisting into shapes that mocked her determination. She stepped forward, her breath coming in quick gasps. As she edged closer to the source of the sound, a figure emerged, small, curled up on the floor. Jake, she choked, hope lacing her voice. The boy stirred, lifting his head slowly, his face pale and streaked with dirt. Mommy, he murmured, his voice cracking. Relief surged through her, but it was short-lived. Jake's eyes darted around, filled with a terror that froze her insides. Mom, it's not safe, he cried, scrambling to his feet, looking behind him with fear etched on his features. We have to go, now. Why? What's happening? What did you see? She pressed, her heart thumping violently in her chest. His response was lost in a sudden gust of wind that swept through the corridor, slamming the front door shut with a deafening thud. They both jumped, eyes wide. The darkness deepened, a tangible weight pressing down upon them. I saw it. I saw the thing in the basement, Jake whispered, his voice barely above a tremor. It knows you, Mom. It said before he could finish. The air thickened, dragging a shrouded figure from the shadows. A low growl emanated, vibrating through the walls, sending chills skittering across her skin. The darkness twisted, the stench of decay twisting her insides as the entity folded in on itself, revealing more of its horrifying form. Children should be seen and not heard, it hissed, the voice layering like an echo, haunting and familiar. No! Sarah screamed, stepping protectively in front of Jake, though her legs trembled. You don't get to take him. Jake's face was pale, eyes wide with disbelief. Mom, we have to run. He tugged at her, but she couldn't take her eyes off the monstrosity looming before them, its shadow twisting and writhing as if it fed off her fear. Run where? She barked, her strength waning as despair seeped in. It'll catch us. A fleeting thought darted through her mind. What if it was already enjoying the game? What if escaping meant losing everything they fought for? The memories of their life together burned in her mind, a tug of war between fear and love, the ultimate choices in a game she didn't want to play. Step into the light, the creature beckoned, its voice softening, almost soothing. Where it's safe, where you'll understand. No. Jake shouted, tugging her back. Don't. It's lying. In that moment, the darkness swirled, becoming more vicious, more alive. The walls of the hallway closed in around them, and the lights flickered wildly, casting long shadows that danced unnaturally. Mom! Jake cried, his grip tightening on her arm. In that instant, she knew she had to act. They needed to escape this maze of shadows. An unthinkable idea formed in her mind. The basement might not just be a place of horror, but perhaps a way to fight back. Jake, we're going back to the basement, she said firmly, dread twisting in her gut. Are you crazy? He screamed. No. That's where it came from. The shadows around them pulsed menacingly, but an ember of hope sparked within her. Perhaps facing the truth wasn't the end. Maybe it was the only way forward, no matter how terrifying. As long as we're together, she whispered, determination hardening her voice. With a resolve born of love and desperation, they turned away from the dark threat, heading back towards where all of it had started. But the wall of darkness seemed to breathe around them, shifting, closing ranks as if to trap them within. Would they manage to confront the horror in the basement? Or would the shadows swallow them whole? The air cracked with a sudden, oppressive tension as the last remnants of light flickered out, plunging them into the depths of the unknown. The basement door loomed ahead, barely visible in the dim glow of the flickering flashlight. Sarah's breath was ragged, laced with dread and determination. She felt the weight of every heartbeat as they neared the stairs leading down into the darkness. This place held more than just shadows. It was a dungeon of guilt and fear, and its secrets clawed at the edges of her memory. Mom, please, Jake whimpered, sensing the gradual descent into terror. I don't want to. Trust me, Jake, she replied, forcing the words through clenched teeth. Each step felt like a descent into hell itself, the darkness growing thicker and more suffocating. The cold seeped through her skin, drawn from the abyss below, bidding her to turn back. But there was nowhere left to flee. As they reached the bottom, the air changed. It hung heavy with decay and whispered secrets. Jake's hand was a vice on her wrist, his breath quickening with every sound that punctuated the silence. The faint scratching noises began, echoing off the concrete walls like frantic whispers begging to be released. Stay close, Sarah instructed, her voice trembling but resolute. They stepped into the main room, their footsteps muffled by the dust and despair that clung to the floor. The flashlight illuminated only a small circle of space, revealing cracked walls that seemed to sway and pulse. Where is it? Jake asked, looking around wildly. The fear in his eyes mirrored her own. I don't know, she admitted, her throat dry. Then she heard it. Low and rhythmic, a voice spoken with malice. It felt familiar, like the echo of a long-forgotten nightmare. Come closer, understand what you've lost, shut up. Sarah shouted into the abyss, her words laced with desperation. But the voice only laughed, dark and hollow, resonating through the room with a sickening glee. Why did you leave me? It taunted, calculating. You promised to protect him, yet here you are so weak. A gust of icy air washed over them, and her flashlight flickered violently before going out, plunging them into pitch black. Panic surged through Sarah's veins. She fumbled in the darkness, desperately trying to regroup. Jake cried out, and in that moment, she felt him stumble back into someone. Mom! Don't let it take me! He cried, grasping for her, his fingers brushing against her cheek in the dark. Jake, I'm here! She shouted, her heart racing. The terror was palpable, wrapping around them like chains. They had to push forward, to confront whatever lay ahead. Suddenly, a cold hand clasped around her ankle. It gripped hard, pulling her down, and Sarah felt a scream die in her throat. The shadows morphed, crawling across the floor and seizing her limbs, pinning her in place. She looked down, into the abyss, ready to fight. Jake's screams echoed in her ears, flooding her with adrenaline. "Mom, help me." With every ounce of strength, she ripped free from the shadows choking her. "Jake!" She flung herself towards the faint outline of her son, reaching out until her fingers connected with him. Together, they had to escape this nightmare, but then, the darkness shifted, and she caught a glimpse of its form, faceless, lurking just beyond the flashlight's reach, watching them with hungry eyes. "Do you think you can run from me?" it whispered, the voice smooth and serpentine. "You will never leave. This is where you belong. Run, Jake, now." Sarah screamed, shoving him towards the stairs as the appendages of shadow clawed at her, with the rush of pure terror fueling him. He took her hand and they raced toward the stairs. Every footfall seemed to resonate with unseen laughter, mocking their desperate bid for freedom, but as they neared the exit, the shadows roared, twisting and writhing, intent on reclaiming their prey. The walls sighed, the mortar leaking despair, and for a moment, the way out seemed to close altogether. Would they make it? Or would the darkness drag them back forever? Just as they reached the first step, a bone-chilling howl erupted from below, echoing as if signaling the end. The door rattled violently, and Sarah felt a cold hand grasp her heart, squeezing tight. "Mom," Jake whispered, his expression betraying the creeping doubt clawing at him. They were running out of time, and the darkness was hungry. Would they find light, or would they vanish in the depths of a nightmare made real? With a surge of adrenaline, Sarah pushed past the terror gnawing at her thoughts. She was nearly at the top of the stairs when the shadows lunged forward, a tidal wave of darkness intent on dragging them back. Their icy tendrils snapped at her heels, pulling, tugging, as she felt them claw into her flesh like desperate hands. "Keep going," she screamed, her voice cracking, full of raw fear. She felt Jake's grip tighten, the warmth of his small hand keeping her grounded. They couldn't stop, failure wasn't an option. As they reached the door, it resisted, creaking against her frantic shove. The incessant howl from the dark below grew louder, an anguished wail that rattled her bones. It was furious now, angry at being denied its prey. Come on," she begged, summoning every ounce of strength. Finally, the door gave way, swinging open with a protest that echoed through the basement, like a mournful howl bidding farewell. They stumbled out and into the dim light of the hallway, the door slamming shut behind them with a thunderous crash that vibrated through the air. But there was no time to breathe a sigh of relief. The heavy silence was broken by the rhythmic scratching sound, louder now, reverberating through the walls. "Why are we still hearing it?" "It's outside too," Jake said, his voice rising in panic. The realization settled like lead in her stomach. "Close your eyes, Jake," she ordered, though she knew he was too frightened to comply. The shadows seeped from beneath the door, tendrils creeping through the cracks, hungry to reclaim their lost victims. Sarah looked at her son, eyes wide with terror, reminding her of the innocence she fought to protect. "Mom," his voice trembled. "What if it follows us?" "We'll find a way to stop it," she assured, though doubt wormed its way into her heart. What if they were too late? She grabbed Jake's hand and pulled him away from the door, moving down the hallway which was illuminated by flickering lights overhead. The air felt alive, static with dread, and every creak of the floorboards beneath them echoed painfully loud in her ears. "Is it gone?" Jake whispered, glancing back towards the door, as if expecting it to burst open at any moment, unleashing chaos once more. The scratching stopped abruptly. Silence hung heavy around them, as thick as fog, suffocating. Sarah's heart raced, but she couldn't let fear freeze her in place. They kept moving, fueled by a raw instinct to survive. Suddenly, the lights flickered violently, casting shadows that danced ominously around them. Then they went out completely, plunging them into a darkness more suffocating than the basement. "Jake!" Sarah shouted, panic clawing at her throat. Adrenaline flooded her limbs as she tried to navigate the pitch black, feeling for his hand in the dark. "Right here, Mom," he replied, his voice cracking with fear. "Stick close," she whispered, more for her own reassurance than his. Then came a growl, deep, guttural, the sound of something monstrous stirring in the depths. It rolled through the darkness like thunder, causing her stomach to drop. "What is that?" Jake whimpered. "I don't know, but we need to find somewhere safe," Sarah urged, her voice shaky. They stumbled through the hall, every step echoing with the sense of impending doom. The walls felt alive, pressing in on them, and shadows flitted along the edges of her vision, barely seen yet deeply felt. The air grew colder, making the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. As they rounded a corner, Sarah spotted a small window at the far end of the corridor. Hope ignited within her, a way out if only they could reach it. "Look, Jake." She pointed, but her heart sank as a shriek pierced the air, drowning out her words. It was there, the faceless creature, its presence palpable as it materialized from the shadows, blocking their escape. The terror in Jake's eyes was mirrored in her own. "What do we do?" he gasped, clutching her arm. "We fight or we run," she said, gritting her teeth. The creature moved closer, a monstrous silhouette blending with the dark. Would they break through the shadows once more? Or would this horrifying entity claim them as its own? The darkness loomed ever closer, leaving them two choices: face their fear or surrender to it. With the creature bearing down, it was time to decide. What would it take to survive? The growl resonated through the corridor, shaking Sarah to her core. She felt the heat of the creature's breath creeping closer, heavy and menacing. "Jake," she whispered, swallowing hard, "we need to run." Without waiting for a reply, she grabbed his hand tightly and bolted to the right. The pounding of her heart echoed like a drum in her ears, drowning out everything else. With each step, the monster seemed to follow, its growl transformed into a snarl building in intensity, a predator savoring the chase. The hallway stretched endlessly. Glancing over her shoulder, Sarah saw a glimpse of the creature, a dark, shifting mass, features obscured but eyes glinting with an unnatural hunger. Fear washed over her. They couldn't let it catch them. "Turn!" she shouted, taking a sharp left into a room, slamming the door behind them. The walls were lined with dusty shelves, filled with long-forgotten relics. A thick smell of mildew hung in the air, and for a moment, in that suffocating stillness, she prayed they had found temporary sanctuary. Jake pressed against her, his breath quick and shallow, and Sarah could feel him vibrating with fear. "What if it finds us?" he whimpered. "We won't let that happen," she said, more fiercely than she felt. The door rattled violently. The creature outside was closer than they hoped, its claws scraping against the wood as it tried to pry the door open. "Mom!" Jake cried, eyes wide as the last vestiges of hope slipped away. "Keep quiet," she hissed, pulling him into a dark corner, hidden behind a stack of old crates. She held her breath, listening intently. The scratching grew frantic, punctuated by sharp, gnashing teeth. The remnants of long-forgotten items tumbled around them as the door finally burst open. The creature prowled in, its form shifting like smoke, evil intent woven into its very being. She could see it now, silhouetted against the faint light in the hallway, its featureless face turned towards them, searching. Panic flared in her chest, threatening to explode. It was no longer just a figment of darkness, it was real. It could see them. With nothing but instinct driving her, Sarah reached for a jagged piece of broken glass that lay among the rubble at her feet. "When I say go," she whispered fiercely, "we run for the window." Jake nodded, his face pale but resolute. Suddenly, the creature paused, as if sensing something. The air grew impossibly heavy. It turned its head slightly, and Sarah felt the weight of its gaze, empty yet filled with malevolence. Tension tightened like a noose around her throat. "Go!" she shouted, lunging toward the window and shattering the glass with her makeshift weapon. The shards rained down, glinting like broken promises as she shoved the window open. Jake hesitated, glancing back at the creature that now prowled closer, a silhouette of despair. "Jump, Jake!" she urged. He sprang forward, his small body slipping through the jagged opening, but as she turned to follow him, chaos erupted. A heavy force slammed into her from behind, throwing Sarah off balance. She gasped as she felt claws slice through her shirt, grazing her shoulder. "Mom!" Jake yelled from outside, panic lacing his voice. Sarah twisted around, clutching her weapon tightly. The creature loomed over her, its maw opening wide, revealing rows of impossibly sharp teeth. Desperation surged through her, and she swung the glass shard wildly, desperately trying to fend it off. In that instant, everything seemed to freeze. The hallway, the creature, even her own heartbeat. As if the world was holding its breath. But before she could strike again, the creature lunged forward. Just as sharp teeth grazed her skin, the hallway flooded with light, and a deafening crack echoed through the air. What happened next was a blur. A blinding flash, then silence. When the light faded, Sarah found herself lying on the cold floor of the hallway. The creature was gone, but a sickening feeling lingered, a quiet dread settling in her bones. Jake was there, gripping her hand, eyes wide and glistening. "What just happened?" he murmured, but Sarah didn't answer. Why was there still that echo of growling in her ears? What had they unleashed? As shadows flickered in the aftermath that engulfed them, a chilling thought crept into her mind. The creature might be gone for now, but what if it wasn't finished with them yet? A new sound broke the silence, the walls trembling as the scratching resumed, but this time, from multiple places. How long could they really hide? The scratching intensified, reverberating through the room like a relentless heartbeat, sending shivers crawling up Sarah's spine. It was no longer just one creature, it sounded like a chorus of tortured souls, desperate to escape their confines. "Jake," she whispered, her voice trembling, "we need to leave right now." As panic tightened around her throat, Sarah caught a glimpse of the window. Shattered glass sparkled ominously, reflecting remnants of the blinding light that had saved them. But how long would it hold? Jake nodded, his eyes wide and shining with fear. "Where do we go?" "We find our way out of here," Sarah replied, her heart racing as she spoke. She heard it again, the scraping, but now it was coming from every corner, each sound echoing with sinister intent. It felt like they were trapped in a nightmare, one they couldn't wake up from. Gathering what remained of her courage, she ushered Jake toward the door. She peeked through the door frame, wincing as she braced herself for the scene outside. No creature loomed in sight, but that didn't mean they were safe. "Go. Stay close." They stepped into the dimly lit hallway, shadows creeping like fingers around them. The atmosphere felt thick, as if the air itself conspired against them. Every step was met with an eerie silence, but Sarah's instinct screamed that something was very wrong. Jake's small hand gripped hers tightly. "What if it comes back?" he whispered, panic lacing his words. "We have to keep moving," Sarah urged, her voice low and firm, yet each word felt like a lie. She wasn't sure what awaited them. In the back of her mind, she sensed those shadows weren't simply hiding, they were watching, waiting. As they hurried down the corridor, Sarah thought she recognized one of the rooms, a split-second glimpse of a faded door adorned with peeling wallpaper. It felt familiar, taunting her like the stench of mildew that lingered in the air. Just as they reached the distorted door, a chilling howl echoed from the far end of the hall, followed by a clattering noise that made Sarah freeze. She glanced at Jake, terror apparent on his young face. "Shoo!" she pleaded, but the scratching noises grew louder, a cacophony of claws digging into the wood, closing in on them. "Mom!" Jake's voice squeaked, his grip tightening. "Shoo!" she hissed again, feeling the sharpness of her words. She didn't want to scare him further, but there was no time for reassurance. She flung the door open and shoved Jake inside, following him quickly. The room was cluttered, filled with old furniture that had been abandoned long ago. Dusty bookshelves and tarnished mirrors stood like sentinels in the thickening gloom. Almost immediately, Sarah felt an unsettling presence. It was as if the walls themselves were alive, breathing in sync with her panic. Footsteps echoed from the hallway. They were coming closer. "Mom, what if it finds us?" Jake's voice trembled, and in that moment, the air in the room shifted. It thickened, turning cold, curling around them like an embrace. "Stay quiet, Jake. Please just keep quiet." Suddenly, something in the corner caught her eye, a flicker of movement. Her breath hitched. Jake, over there, a shape was emerging, shifting between the shadows, edging closer to them. She lunged forward instinctively, lunging toward the light switch, praying for illumination. With a tap, the room glowed softly, revealing nothing but the remnants of forgotten life. Yet, her heartbeat drummed against her ribs as she turned back to Jake. His eyes were wide, fixed on something behind her. Sarah spun around. A tall figure loomed in the doorway, obscured but undeniably there. The faint smell of decay flooded her senses as that chilling growl sliced through her mind, resonating with hunger and fury. They had nowhere to go. Run! She screamed, her voice slicing the air to shatter the paralyzing fear. As she grabbed Jake's hand again, a terrible laughter echoed from the dark, a sound that promised their nightmares were just beginning. They sprinted through the room, hearts pounding like war drums, instincts driving them into the dark corners of their new reality. Fumbling, Sarah pulled Jake into a narrow space behind a crumbling wardrobe, a desperate attempt to shield themselves from the approaching terror. "Mom, I can't breathe," Jake whimpered, his breath hitching with panic. "Shoo! Just hold on," Sarah whispered urgently, squeezing his hand as she felt the vibrations of footsteps outside the door. Each thud felt like an anchor pulling them deeper into nightmare territory. She pressed her back against the cold wood, straining to listen. The laughter stopped. Silence descended like a thick blanket, smothering her nerves. But only for a moment. A sharp, scraping noise sliced through the stillness, claws against wood. Then, a whisper threaded through the air, chilling her spine. "I can smell you." Fear gripped her heart. It was hunting them. "What do we do?" Jake squeaked, his voice trembling. The moisture on his palms felt slick against her own. "Just stay quiet," Sarah repeated, her mind racing. She searched her surroundings for something, anything that could protect them. The scratching grew more frantic, a persistent reminder that time was slipping away. The door rattled, a wretched sound of wood straining against the weight of dread. With each shake, the walls seemed to pulse, as if sharing the creature's desire for freedom. Then, the door did something Sarah couldn't comprehend. It opened slowly, almost reverently, revealing a darkness beyond that felt alive, breathing, watching. Suddenly, a flash of light illuminated the hallway, blinding and electric. Sarah squinted, desperately trying to ascertain if it was aid or another omen of doom. A voice echoed through that blinding light. "Hello? Is anyone there?" "Over here," Sarah called, hope blooming like a fragile flower in the crushing dark. But what if it was a trick? What if the creature was using manipulation, luring her into the light? "Mom!" Jake pulled at her sleeve, terror radiating from him. "Don't go out there." "I have to know, Jake." The conflict tore at her gut, but urgency outweighed her hesitation. She leaned out from their hiding spot, inching toward the light, urging herself to stay vigilant. The figure stepped into their view, a woman, silhouetted against the glow. Her face was obscured, but her clothes looked like remnants of a past life, torn and stained with something dark. Laughter, a sharp cackle, erupted from her lips. "No. No." Sarah hissed, praying she was wrong, understanding now the truth of their predicament. The woman wasn't there to help, she was part of whatever hunted them. The scratching escalated as if the noise itself sensed the urgency in her heart, a warning they needed to escape. "Jake, we have to go." She grabbed his hand, pulling him tight. The woman's laughter echoed again, wilder, more insistent. "You can't run from us." "Where are we going?" Jake asked, panic cracking through the urgency. "Anywhere but here." Sarah thrust the wardrobe open, exposing the narrow corridor beyond. They stumbled into the hallway, adrenaline coursing through them, chasing away doubt. It felt like moving through syrup, each second stretching unbearably thin. But then came the growl, the deep, guttural sound that split the air. The creature was right behind them, terror propelled them forward. They launched themselves down the corridor, racing towards the next door, the next chance at escape. A door loomed ahead, its surface marred and cracked, but it represented possibility. With a forceful push, Sarah flung it open. But the scene inside paused her heart. Darkness swallowed everything, a chasm of despair and dread. As they hesitated on the threshold, Jake's voice caught in his throat. "Mom? What is that?" From the depth of the blackness, a slithering shape snapped into view, a long, serpentine form, woven of shadow and malice, coiling toward them. In an instant, Sarah knew this was not a safe place. Back! Back! She screamed, but the door swung shut behind them, sealing their fate within the confines of horror. What lurked? A head twisted and contorted through the darkness, drawing nearer with a purpose. They were trapped, the weight of impending doom closing in around them like a vice. What did we just walk into? Sarah thought, dread washing over her as she braced for the unknown. And then, muffled voices broke through the silence, echoes reverberating in the darkness. They weren't alone. Who else was there in this nightmare, and would they be friend or foe? The darkness wrapped around Sarah and Jake like a suffocating blanket, stifling any hope that lingered in their hearts. She could hear the low murmur of voices, indistinct but filled with a sense of urgency. "Jake, stay close," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the pounding of her heart that he clung to her side, his small fingers trembling against her arm. "What if they're like the thing outside?" he asked, eyes wide with fear. "I don't know, but we can't just stand here." With every ounce of courage left within her, Sarah stepped forward into the abyss. The air felt electric, alive with an inexplicable energy, yet tinged with malice. The voices grew louder, coiling around them like tendrils, tugging at the edges of their sanity. "Who is there?" she called out, her voice steady despite the rising dread. Suddenly, the shadows shifted, revealing figures half hidden in the gloom. They bore the same haunted look Sarah had seen mirrored in Jake's eyes, fear intermingled with the dull resignation of those trapped. "You shouldn't have come here," one man rasped, his face etched with lines of suffering. "Help us," Jake pleaded, his small frame trembling. The figures exchanged wary glances, their expressions flickering between sympathy and reluctance. "It's not safe." "They're always watching," another warned, glancing back into the deeper shadows. "But we can't stay here," Sarah insisted, desperation mounting. "There's something chasing us." The shadows seemed to breathe, shifting ominously at her words. The man stepped closer, his face slowly coming into view, hollow eyes stared back at her. "Then you must face it, or become part of it." "What do you mean?" Sarah demanded, confusion mixing with fear. Before he could respond, a sickening growl echoed through the corridor, vibrating in her bones. The voices fell silent, replaced by a gut-wrenching sound of scratching, thousands of claws scraping against the wood, hungry for prey. "We're out of time," one of the figures hissed. "You need to go. We can't help you." "No," Jake cried, panic sent waves through the small group. "We can't just leave you. Run!" the man shouted, urgency lacing his command. Sarah gripped Jake's hand tightly, heart racing as she felt the floor shake beneath them. The entity outside was coming, and it hungered for their fear. "Follow me," Sarah yelled, forcing herself to turn away from the pleading eyes of the others. "We need to find a way out." Together, they sprinted into the darkness, the growling echoing behind them. The shadows seemed to reach for them, hungry and relentless. Panic surged as they realized they weren't just running from a creature, but from a force that thrived on despair. "Mom!" Jake shouted, pulling her back as a figure dashed across their path, but Sarah pressed on, refusing to let fear sink its teeth into them. She spotted a staircase at the end of the corridor, flickering light cascading from its uncertain source. It whispered of freedom, yet she could almost feel the weight of dread pulling her back. "Up there," she pointed. They raced to the stairs, the growl intensifying behind them, no doubt drawn to the scent of their fear. Every step felt like it might be their last as they ascended, the scratching growing louder, closing in fast. They burst into a small, cramped attic. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light cutting through the cracks, illuminating the forgotten remnants of a long-abandoned life. Old trunks lay scattered about, memories trapped in time, but she couldn't focus on that now. "Mom, what if it finds us?" Jake whimpered, his voice breaking. "The windows," Sarah cried, dashing over to one. She threw it open, the sound echoing in the quiet. The choice was clear: leap into the unknown or face the horror behind them. Casting one last look at Jake, her heart ached, but she steeled herself. "It's now or never, sweetheart," she shouted, gently urging him towards the window. She climbed onto the sill and helped Jake up beside her. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. With a leap, they plunged into the cool night air. It was a leap of faith into freedom, away from the terror. They hit the ground, rolling to safety, hearts pounding but relieved. The shadows screamed behind them, a cacophony of anger and despair. As they scrambled to their feet, Sarah glanced back just once, knowing they had escaped the clutches of darkness for now. But the shadows whispered promises of return. She pulled Jake tight, their breaths coming in quick gasps. "I'm here, Jake. You're safe." He looked up at her, eyes wide but trusting. "What happens now, Mom?" She didn't have the answers, but she felt a flicker of hope igniting within. "Now, we find a way to make sure it never comes back. We take a stand." Hand in hand, they began to walk away from the darkness, determined to reclaim their lives. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that shadows lingered just beyond their sight. One way or another, they would have to face their fears and conquer the evil that dwelled deep within their haunted home. And as they stepped into the light of a new dawn, the promise of freedom whispered softly, but Sarah knew in her heart that the real battle had only just begun. Subscribe immediately for more exclusive stories. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about what happens next. Share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to support this channel. Don't wait even one more second.